I'm Ron Paul, a congressman from Texas. I am pleased to be here to debate because this is a very important debate, but I am convinced that needless and unnecessary wars are a great detriment. They undermine our prosperity and our liberties, they add to our deficits, and they consume our welfare. We should take a careful look at our foreign policy.
Congressman Paul, many Middle East experts now say Iran may be less than 1 year away from getting a nuclear weapon. Now, judging from your past statements, even if you had solid intelligence that Iran, in fact, was going to get a nuclear weapon, President Paul would remove the U.S. sanctions on Iran, including those added by the Obama administration. So, to be clear, GOP nominee Paul would be running left of President Obama on the issue of Iran.
But I'd be running with the American people because it would be a much better policy. But for you to say that there's some scientific evidence and some people arguing that maybe in a year they might have a weapon, there's a lot more saying they don't have it. There's no UN evidence of that happening. Klepper at the in our National Security Department, he says there is no evidence. It's no different than it was in 2003. You know what I really fear about what's happening here? It's another Iraq coming. Is war propaganda going on, and we're arguing. To me, the greatest danger is that we will have a president that will overreact, that we will soon bomb Iran. And the sentiment is very mixed. It's very mixed even in Israel. You know, the head of the security for Israel, who just recently retired, said that it wouldn't make any sense to do this, to take them out because they might be having a weapon. So I would say that the greatest danger is overreacting. There is no evidence that they have it. And it would make more sense if we lived through the Cold War, which we did, with 30,000 missiles pointed at us. We ought to really sit back and think and not jump the gun and believe that we are going to be attacked. That's how we got into that useless war in Iraq and lost so much in Iraq.
Congressman Paul, the question was based on the premise that you had solid intelligence. You actually had solid intelligence as President Paul. And yet you still, at that point, would pull back U.S. sanctions, and again, as a GOP nominee, would be running left of President Obama on this issue.
Yes, all we're doing is promoting their desire to have it. Ehud Barak, the defense minister for Israel, said that if he were in Iran, he would probably want a nuclear weapon too, because they're surrounded for geopolitical reasons. So that's an understanding. So the fact that they are surrounded, they have a desire. And how do we treat people when they have a nuclear weapon? With a lot more respect. What did we do with Libya? We talked to them, we talked them out of their nuclear weapon, and then we killed them. So it makes more sense to work with people. And the whole thing is that nuclear weapons are loaded over there. Pakistan and India, Israel has 300 of them. We have our ships there. We got to get it in a proper context. Right. We don't need another war.
Understood. And you make that point quite a lot. I'll try one more time. Iran is reportedly running exercises on closing the Straits of Hormuz, a key passage, as you know, for global trade. Now, what should the U.S. response be if Iran were to take that dramatic step?
Well, the plans are on the book. All they talk about is when are we, the West, going to bomb Iran? So why wouldn't they talk about, they don't have a weapon, they don't have a nuclear weapon, why wouldn't they try to send out some information there and say, you know, if you come and bomb us, we might close the Straits of Hormuz down. So already the president, I think, is wisely backing off on the sanctions because it's going to be an economic calamity if you take all the oil out of Europe. So I think that makes sense. He knows these sanctions are overreaching. Sanctions are an act of war when you prevent goods and services from going into a country. We need to approach this a little differently. We have 12,000 diplomats in our services. We ought to use a little bit of diplomacy once in a while.
Okay. Just a reminder again, that little friendly beep is when you're you wrap up.
And we all know what's going to happen. We know that Iran is going to be the hegemon and try to come into Iraq and have the dominant influence. And then Iraq will essentially have dominance from the Persian Gulf all the way to the Mediterranean through its ally Syria. And with all due respect to Ron Paul, I think I have never heard a more dangerous answer for American security than the one that we just heard from Ron Paul. And I'll tell you the reason why. And the reason why I would say that is because we know without a shadow of a doubt that Iran will take a nuclear weapon. They will use it to wipe our ally Israel off the face of the map, and they've stated they will use it against the United States of America. Look no further than the Iranian Constitution, which states unequivocally that their mission is to extend jihad across the world and eventually to set up a worldwide caliphate. We would be fools and knaves to ignore their purpose and their plan.
Congressman Paul.
Obviously, I would like to see a lot less nuclear weapons. I don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. I would like to reduce them because there would be less chance of war. But to declare war on 1.2 billion Muslims and say all Muslims are the same, this is dangerous talk. Yeah, there are some radicals, but they don't come here to kill us because we're free and prosperous. Do they go to Switzerland and Sweden? I mean, that's absurd. If you think that is the reason, we have no chance of winning this. They come here and they explicitly explain it to it. The CIA has explained it to us. It said they come here and they want to do us harm because we're bombing them. What is the whole world about the drone being in Iran? And we're begging and pleading, and how are we going to start a war to get this drone back? Why were we flying the drone over Iran? Why do we have to bomb so many countries? Why are we have 900 bases, 130 countries, and we're totally bankrupt? How are you going to rebuild the military when we have no money? How are we going to take care of the people? So I think this wild goal to have another war in the name of defense is the dangerous thing. The danger is really us overreacting, and we need a strong national defense, and we need to only go to war with a declaration of war and just carelessly flouting it and starting these wars so often.
Speaker Gingrich, is Congressman Paul.
Can I respond to that? Can I respond? And the problem would be the greatest underreaction in world history if we have an avowed madman who uses that nuclear weapon to wipe nations off the face of the earth. And we have an IAEA report that just recently came out that said literally Iran is within just months of being able to obtain that weapon. Okay. Nothing could be more dangerous than the comments that we just heard.
All right, 30 seconds.
There is no UN report that said that. It's totally wrong on what you just said.
IAEA report.
That is not true. They produced information that led you to believe that, but they have no evidence. There's been no enrichment of these bombs.
If we agree with that, the United States people could be at risk of our national security.
So I'd like to finish. If she thinks we live in a dangerous world, she ought to think back when I was drafted in 1962 with the nuclear missiles in Cuba. And Kennedy calls Khrushchev and talks to him and talks him out of this, and we don't have a nuclear exchange. And you're trying to dramatize this, that we have to go and treat Iran like we've treated Iraq and kill 1 million Iraqis, and 8,000 some Americans have died since we've gone to war. You cannot solve these problems with war. You can solve the problems if we follow our Constitution, go to war, only when we declare the war, go in and win them and get them over with, instead of this endless fighting and this endless attitude that we have enemy all around the world.
But as President, I stand on the side of peace.
Thank you.
What do you take from the squabble between Congressman Ron Paul and Congresswoman Michele Bachmann over foreign policy?
Right. That's what I'll take from it. Michele Bachmann is right. Ron Paul is, as Michele said, would be a very dangerous commander-in-chief for this country. I think most people sit there and just be stunned that he's advocating policies far to the left of Barack Obama on these issues and showing a sense of almost dismissiveness of the fact that there are people who seek to do harm to us and to our friends, then that's a very dangerous position to have as a man who would be commander.
He doesn't seem to accept the IAEA decision that there's.
Again, I think this is a case, I think, that you can be blinded by, what you want to believe as opposed to what the facts are.
He's 5'2" and he's 6'4". He fights with missiles and with spears. He's all of 31 and he's only 17. He's been a soldier for 1,000 years. He's a Catholic, a Hindu, an atheist, a Jain, a Buddhist and a Baptist and a Jew. And he knows he shouldn't kill, and he knows he always will. Kill you for me, my friend, and me for you. And he's fighting for Canada, he's fighting for France, he's fighting for the USA. And he's fighting for the Russians, and he's fighting for Japan. And he thinks we'll put an end to war this way. And he's fighting for democracy, he's fighting for the Reds. He says it's for the peace of all. He's the one who must decide who's to live and who's to die. And he never sees the writing on the wall. But without him, how would Hitler have condemned him at Laval? Without him, Caesar would have stood alone. He's the one who gives his body as a weapon of the war. And without him, all this killing can't go on. He's the universal soldier, and he really is to blame. His orders come from far away no more. They come from here and there, and you and me. And brothers, can't you see? This is not the way we put the end to war.